Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shenanigans Show. As you saw in those disclaimers, we are posting every day. I am posting every day to YouTube in February. It is the 19th, I believe, so we're in the long stretch. We're almost done. We're almost there. About 9 more days to go, and we're getting there. It feels like December just wrapped up, or not even that. It feels like December 2025 just started, and we're already in 2026, which is like, how the fuck is that possible? So, as I mentioned in those disclaimers, I do wear the same shirts in a lot of my videos. I try not to do that so much, especially because I'm still wearing some of my Christmas shirts, and I'm trying not to do that too much past mid-January. So, and also too, it's like I'm trying to, at least with February, since I'm posting daily, I'm trying to space out the shirts that I'm wearing. I didn't feel like putting on a sweatshirt or changing this shirt when this has been my like at-home comfort shirt, inside the house comfort shirt, for this week. I didn't feel like changing it or putting a sweater on or wear it. So you're getting a Christmas shirt right now. With Christmas. As you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, this is your yearly reminder, your New Year reminder, bi-yearly reminder about reading goals. And I'm probably going to do this kind of like mid-November, at the earliest mid-November, but maybe even into December a little bit, just because we sometimes forget this going into the new year, and then we also forget it going towards the end of the year, that reading at the end of the day is just a competition with yourself. If you're gonna make it a competition, don't involve other people. It's kind of like the quote where, I'm blanking on who says it, but it was he in an episode of Criminal Minds, which is why I know it. It's hunting is the only sport where the other team, the other side doesn't know they're playing. Hunting is the only sport where the other team doesn't know they're playing. It's kind of like that, almost. Not that, I'm not saying reading challenges are bad, and I'm not saying hunting is good. It's just making reading and yearly goals, yearly challenges into a competition with other people. It's like you're making them part of your own competition when they really don't need to be, and at the end of the day, they don't know that they're part of your competition. They don't know that you're comparing how much you've read or haven't read to how much they've read and haven't read. And at the end of the day, like, is it interesting to compare reading stats to other people? Yeah, it can be interesting. It can help see what you've read, what you haven't read, and see how that lines up with someone else's. But that does not mean words. It like your reading worth, even though I don't think there's a worth attached to how much you do or do read. But your worth as a reader is not attached to how much you do or do not read in comparison to other readers. And this video is inspired by Season of Fusions, which I've linked down below in the description. And I've also linked one of my other videos where I talk about how I'm redefining my yearly reading challenge, my yearly reading goal. And in that, I basically discuss, I'm going to touch on it a little bit here. But basically, I'm saying, how, like in that video, I said how, like, instead of viewing it as a number I need to get to, it's a number that, yes, I would like to get to, but I'm more focusing on trying to enjoy the year in books and seeing how much I've progressed. And, you know, sometimes life happens. Like, let's say, to use me as an example, like 5 years ago, when I was still in college, I could very easily read over 100 books. And part of that was because I was including the books that I would read as part of my university classes, which counts as reading. So part of it was that, but also part of it too was that I was also reading outside of university. I was reading other books outside of university. So it was a little bit easier to hit over 100 books per challenge. Or over 100 books per year. And now it's a little bit harder to do that, not just because I'm not in university, and not just because I have a job, but because, like, instead of reading, I'm consciously and subconsciously choosing to scroll through TikTok on my phone or Instagram, or I'm putting on YouTube videos when I'm eating dinner, when I could be pulling up an audiobook and playing the audiobook while I eat dinner. And something I do is, before I go to bed at night, is I usually play an audiobook as I go to sleep. And usually it's an audiobook it's an audiobook version of a book I've already read. So usually I'm playing The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and I also have The Phantom Tollbooth as one of my audiobooks that I kind of play those on rounds because I know the sounds of them, the rhythms, and I kind of know what to expect, so it's a little bit easier for me to fall asleep to those, but I need something playing. And again, like, I don't count those books. I read The Phantom Tollbooth this year, and then when I'm repeating it as I go to bed, I don't count any repeats I do in the same year. I do think that, like, what I will say, the only thing that I think is quote-unquote cheating when it comes to a reading goal, when it's like a numerical reading goal for a year, the only way I think you can cheat, quote-unquote, is if you read one book twice in the same year. If you reread it the same year that you read it and count that towards your reading goal, then that's what I consider cheating. I do not consider rereading as cheating. Usually, it's only if it happens within the same January to December period of time. Like, I read For Whom the Bell Tolls by J.C. Lynn this year. If I were to read it again this year and count it, then that for me would be cheating. But if I were to read it again next year in 2026, see, like, my brain still thinks it's 2025. So if I'd read it, I think that's also where my brain got mixed up. So if I read it, I was saying this year as if it was 2025. Sorry about that. So let me rephrase. If I had read it in 2025 and then reread it in 2025, I don't remember what I said, but if I had read it in 2025, which I did, reread it again in 2025, then that would be cheating. But if I read it in 2025 and then reread it in 2026, I count the 2026 read towards my reading goal. And it would not be, I could count it towards my 2026 reading goal. And I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings actively, consciously, yearly. I read them once a year, so I always count those towards my reading goals. Like, when I read The Hobbit as my yearly, I usually try to put these towards the beginning of the year so that I can just knock it out of the park and, on the one hand, be done with it, but also know for sure, like, okay, I did read it. And just because for me, that's something that, like, I want to do. I want to be actively reading The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and returning to it consistently. But getting back on track, the reading, like I said, your yearly reading goals, those are not competitions with other people. And at the end of the day, it's not your business what their reading goals are and what their yearly reading goal is and whether or not they've made it. And someone can have a 9-to-5 job, be a parent of 3, be active in their marriage, and have other hobbies while also reading 100+ books a year. And someone can have a 9-to-5 job, not be married, but still have healthy relationships with family and friends, still have a social life, and not have too many other hobbies, but only be able to read 50 books a year. So it really doesn't matter what your life structure looks at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You should not be comparing your yearly reading goals to someone else's. And so, because I want to give some recommendations, because that's what I like doing on my channel, especially because in previous videos I talked about how, at least in one previous reading video, not reading, but in one previous video, which like I mentioned, it's linked up in the description, I've talked about how I'm redefining it. This is kind of like how you can redefine your yearly reading goals and challenges if that's something what you want to do, and how reading more can look like and how it can look differently than what you might expect. So the first one is like trying out new genres. Let's say your usual genre is fantasy, but you want to try to read more romance. So that's reading more, because usually you only read fantasy. Again, these are examples. Usually you only read fantasy, but now you're trying another genre. So that is reading more than what you usually read. Even if you don't max out your yearly reading challenge, and even if you don't go above and beyond that, you're still reading more in the sense of you're diversifying your reading, maybe not your reading taste, but you're diversifying what you're actually reading. The next one is number 2. I think I have 10. The second one is trying new authors. So maybe you have a set list of, let's say, 5 authors, or actually let's make it 10, because it's a little bit easier. Let's say you have a set list of 10 authors, but then you add in 5 others that you're starting to like. Again, you're reading 5 new authors. Again, even if you don't hit above and beyond of what your yearly reading goal is, if you're adding 5 new authors onto your roster, then that's like 15 authors in total. So there's that. The third one is borrowing more and buying less. Now, I am as susceptible to this as the next person, where being able to walk into a bookstore, pick up some books, and tap your cart and insert it, there's something very satisfying about that. And I think there's like a science to it. You get like the boost of serotonin, you get the happy little hormones in your brain. There is something very nice about that. But at the same time, you can do the same thing with your local libraries. Go to your local library, have them scan your library card, or get a library card, have them scan it, and then check out some books. It's kind of the same hit that you get when I've done it. It's like, okay, I can pick up my book from the library, and a lot of libraries have corresponding apps now that you can place a hold on books through the app and then go pick it up when it's ready, and they can scan your card and you can just grab your books and head on out. Or you can hang out in the library and read them if you want. But try borrowing more and buying less, because then your money can go to books that you actually enjoyed and you actually loved, and authors you actually enjoyed. So number 4 is rereading your favorites. I did talk about this one earlier, where it's like you don't have to count them towards your yearly reading goal, but if you really want, let's say like the example, like not have an official blessing, although that would be a good example for me. But one of the examples I mentioned earlier, For Whom the Bell Tolls, I could have reread that in 2025 and not counted it towards my yearly reading goal for 2025. But I could have reread it and just let myself enjoy it again and get immersed in the story and the setting and the characters. So it's kind of like that thing, like let yourself reread more. And you don't have to count it towards your reading goals, but again, you're reliving some of your favorite stories if you're rereading your favorite books and your favorite authors. So the 5th one is trying other formats. Now this one can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes you just learn that certain formats are not for you. And for me, I kind of go through phases. I always will love my physical books, but I go through phases with ebooks and audiobooks, and I am in my phase where I am not liking ebooks as much. For whatever reason, I'm having a harder time concentrating with ebooks. And it could be, it is very likely, if not partial, like largely in part due to being able to just swipe quickly on TikTok and Instagram. But it's like I have a really hard time with ebooks, and I have to get back into that because that would be really great. But try other formats, because you can do ebooks, you can do audiobooks. Audiobooks are great for being able to, like, if you need to go out on a run, or if you need to go to the gym and work out, or if you need to cook or clean. Like, audiobooks are great. And most of us, when we're cooking or cleaning, we'll put on music, we'll put on a TV show or a movie. That's a great time when you're cooking or cleaning to pop in some headphones and play an audiobook. And another example, let's say you've had a really long day at work, you don't feel like holding up a physical book. That's a really great way to just hold your phone and scroll through an ebook. And it really depends on schedule, financial, not benefits, not implications, assets, maybe, whatever finances you have available, accessible at any given point. Anyway, I can't think of the right word, but depending on what's available at any given point, audiobooks and ebooks tend to be quite a bit cheaper than physical books. So try other formats, and then you can always count those towards your reading rule, because it is the book still. Now, the sixth one that I'm going to mention is going to indie bookstores. I'm not going to harp on Amazon too much, but just because I do have a couple of videos within February talking about Amazon. But going to indie bookstores, like most places, especially if you're in a more, I don't want to say crowded, but it's more populated area, you're bound to have at least one indie bookshop. And just go in there, because usually you're going to see books that aren't as popular, that aren't going to be on TikTok or Instagram as much, that aren't going to be as new, because maybe you saw a book 5 years ago and you sort of remember the cover, you don't really remember the title though, and let's say you pop into an indie bookstore and you see the cover of it, and it was from 5 years ago, and that was a book you were really interested in. It's that kind of a deal where it's sometimes you can find something older books that are really good. One thing for me, I haven't talked about it a lot lately, but I'm really bad at reading new releases. Sometimes I'll be great at it, but I'm really bad at reading new releases, unless it's from an author that I already know. And I always tend to gravitate towards backlisted books that have been published for a year plus. And I think a large part of that for me is because, sorry, I keep having to step away, but I think a large part of that for me is because I don't tend to like trending books as much, and also too, it's easier to find books that I'll really love if it's not something trending, or not something trending at that given moment. Not that trending books are bad, it's just for me they don't always work because of the reasons they're trending. Again, not that they're bad, it's just not my usual cup of tea. But going to your indie bookstores is a great way to not use Amazon, but also a great way to find some older books. So the next one, number 7, is using your physical library. And this one, like I mentioned, borrowing more, and this one really ties into the third one, borrowing more. And that one, borrowing more, can also just be borrowing from friends, but this one specifically is using your physical library, going in, because most librarians will have some form of recommendation, and even if they don't specifically have a recommendation for you, they'll know someone who can kind of recommend you something. And you can always just walk around the bookstore, you can always just walk around the library and see what catches your eye, and just sit down and read it, and then check it out if you're really interested in it and invested. And then number 8 goes hand in hand with 7 and 3, but using library apps like Libby and Hoopla, and this one also goes in with number 5, trying other formats. So Libby and Hoopla make it so accessible to get ebooks and audiobooks, and you do not have to pay anything for it. And it supports your local libraries, and it supports libraries in general. So trying other formats, using library apps, and even using your specific library app. Like I use Los Angeles Public Library, and they have their app, and then you can select which library branch you want it to go to or you want to pick up at. So that's that. The 9th one is finishing a series you really liked or stopping one you're not liking as much. Now this one can hurt a little bit, and I have a hard time with series just because I need to know the ending so that I can, especially with like TV shows, I need to be able to watch the ending so that I don't have to watch it again. Like perfect example is Hilda. I cannot watch the ending of Hilda. Part of it is that because part of it for Hilda is that season 3 is the weakest season in my opinion because they were trying to rush it. But also too, I'm just really bad with endings. I don't like watching endings. And it's the same can be said for series, for book series reading. And like I want to know what that ending is so that I don't have to return to it. And if I decide to reread that series, I just know not to read the last book or know not to read the last third of the last book. So it's that kind of a thing for me. And like finishing a series you like, let's say my experience aside, let's say you start a series, you're really enjoying it, and let's say it's like 2 books. Then it's really easy to pick up the second book and read. Well, might not be really easy, but in theory, and based on the other things that I've mentioned, like using your local library, using Libby and Hoopla, indie bookstores, it should be, again, relatively easy in theory to go to your local independent bookstore, go to your local bookstore, go to your local library, get the book and read it. Or go to Libby and Hoopla, place a hold, and then when you're able to get the book, read it. And the flip side, this is where it might hurt a little bit, but stopping a series you aren't liking, the only reason why I include this one is because if you're not liking it, on the one hand, there's no point in finishing a series you're not liking. But also on the other hand, it'll give you more time to read more books you like because you're not trying to force yourself to finish it. Let's say you've read the first 2 books in a trilogy, but you really weren't liking it, and let's say if you read the 3rd book, or let's say all 3 books are the same length. Let's say they're all 300 pages and you took, each book is 300 pages, and let's say for the first 2 books you spent 3 days reading each. So 3 days reading the first book, 3 days reading the second book. You can kind of wager 3 days reading the 3rd book. And if you decide like, okay, I'm not going to read the 3rd book, then that's 3 days you can spend towards another book that you'll enjoy. So yeah, it's like, on the one hand, it might be a situation where it's like, I'm already 2 books in, I'd rather just see how it ends. But if it's like a 4, 5, 6 plus book series, then where does it end? And then that's even more time you can dedicate to other books that you'll enjoy. So it's like, it gets to a point where stopping a series that you aren't liking will help you in the long run focus on books that you will like. And then the very last one is focus on shorter reads throughout the year. And I only say this because I am a staunch supporter of reading shorter books, because you know what? Those get you through. Shorter books can get you through a lot. They can get you through a reading slump. They can get you through a bad day at work. They can get you through X, Y, and Z, the whole alphabet of stuff. So rather than just trying to pile in a bunch of short reads at the end of the year, scatter it throughout the year. I read a lot of manga and graphic novels, so it's like I spread those throughout my year because sometimes those are maybe 100 and 150 pages in total. I can get those done in a day, no problem. And if I spread those out over the course of half a year, and I had, let's say I had like 20 manga that I read first half of the year that were all about 150 pages, that's still 20 manga on top of whatever else I read. Let's say I read 25 novels and 20 manga in the first half of the year. That's 45 bucks out of the way. And even if it's not manga, if it's like 20 short anthologies, It's still 20 short anthologies that you spread out throughout the year. So instead of trying to pack the 20 short story collections or the 20 graphic novels into the last month of the year, spread it out. And then if there are other short books that you end up reading at the end of the year, that's perfectly fine. It's just don't pack them all into the end of the year. So that is the end of this video, just because there are so many videos on this topic here on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. I just wanted to add in my 2 cents, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's not a competition. It's only a competition with yourself and with your phone, because you can decide to put down your phone and pick up a physical book. You can decide to close out of TikTok, close out of Instagram, close out of YouTube, and open up an audiobook or an ebook. And at the end of the day, it's a competition with yourself and with your phone. So it's not a competition with other people. So let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about this. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.